What is something that you thought was fine as a child but you found out was racist? In like elementary school, kids did this Chinese-Japanese "Welcome to America" thing and would stretch their eyes. I did it too, not knowing WTF it was. Went home and did it in front of my Asian mother and got a good scolding now. You all probably call it something like ding-dong ditching, but we always called it knee__knocking. None of the adults corrected us and I have no idea where we got the name, terminology. The chant where you slant your eyes up and down while saying Chinese, Japanese, money please. The Greek dude in my town wasn't actually called Zeke, everyone just nicknamed him that. Same goes for one of the Aboriginal blokes. His name was Mga. Still don't know either of their names. My mom made us Indian outfits for us to play in. TBF was pretty fun playing pretend riding our horses bareback and learning how to shoot arrows while doing so. Me and my siblings made up a game we called Nazis and Jews. I guess I knew this one was wrong, but when my dad was a kid he had a dog named Near. Named that because he was a Kelpie and he could run fast. The local bowling club had a Chinese restaurant that everyone when talking about it called it the Chinese, purposefully not pronouncing the S. Can you tell I grew up in country Australia? Just everything Shane Dawson did, I was a huge fan of his for years. I was probably around 7, 8 when I started following him. I even watched his infamous The Help parody and I remember thinking that it seemed wrong at the time but I ignored it because I thought he was such a nice guy and he wouldn't do something like that. Now that I'm older, 18, I now clearly see that everything he did was problematic and I'm mad at myself for supporting him for so long. In elementary school my friends and I would play Smear the Queer. I honestly thought a queer was the kid that had the football that everybody else tried to tackle until I was in high school. Also, in my neighborhood there was no ding-dong dash, we had N-word knocking. Ought to be a kid in Kentucky in the 80s. In high school, I went through a brief phase where I'd use boy on the basketball court. I mostly used it to cap off random trash talk in lieu of something like, dude. Figured that was my way of calling an opponent too young or inexperienced to handle me. My dad caught wind of me saying it one day and carefully filled me in on the history and connotations of the term. I had no idea. That was like 20 years ago and I haven't used it since. Back in early high school, middle school, when I took beginner's Japanese, whenever we referred to the classes in our convos we all shortened it to Jap. Mind you, it definitely wasn't an ill intention since we like to shorten everything here in Australia. Feeling sad about the kids in Africa, like just their existence caused sadness. As a kid, whenever I saw a picture of African kids doing ordinary things, I was taught to feel grateful for the things we have and pity for their suffering and starvation, and also finish the food on my plate. So, in high school I took a cartooning class. We had an assignment one day where we had to make an original character, so I thought an alien would be fun. I called him Alien Gonzalez because puns. But wait. There's more. I drew him wearing a poncho and sombrero. He was dancing with Marcus in front of a cactus. I just thought it was a funny drawing. I did not think that through at all. The teacher liked it so much she picked it as the one drawing from her classes to go into a display case in the main hall. So it was prominently displayed there for months. Nobody ever said anything. So yeah, not my finest hour. The Raggedy Ann and Andy books. I loved them as a kid and was so excited to get them for my kids. I got them handmade dolls and everything. We sat down for bedtime reading with the new dolls, and the book was so racist that I had to stop reading and explain to them why that was bad. Seriously, massively racist. I was accidentally dressed up in blackface one Halloween when I was about 8 or 9. I wanted an knockoff Batman, domino mask, but my mother didn't want to pick one up, so she painted the same shape on my face, but she fucked it up, couldn't get the shape right, and decided to paint my whole face black. I thought I just looked like a dork at the time, but in hindsight, lol. I loved Miss Cleo, the late-night card reader. I was about 4 years old and I'd run around with a t-shirt around my head saying "call me now" in a fake accent. I even tried to get my mom to put dark makeup on my face ... so I could look like Miss Cleo. Fortunately my mom got super embarrassed, mad, and forbade me from doing blackface. Assuming someone speaks or doesn't speak a language based on their race, and interacting with them accordingly. For example, talking to an Asian-looking person in Chinese, expressing extreme surprise if a black person in China knows Chinese, etc., without knowing any other information about these people. It's not that I've done these things, I just thought they'd be perfectly fine when I was a child. One of my mom's boyfriends used to call black people "pooskins" in front of me, and being young I thought it was funny, as well wanted to fit in, and my mom, wanting to be loved after the divorce from my father, joined into and encouraged it. I got pulled up at school for saying it to a kid I was annoyed at. Only then someone told me it was a really bad word, and I stopped saying it. My mom's boyfriend didn't. I'm so sorry. Oh boy, I heard all sorts of things in my family and hometown that I didn't think about until I got older. For starters, I still slip up sometimes by calling chocolate sprinkles Jimmy's. Other people mention some of these, but things I said as a kid like Indian giver, Indian summer, Indian burn, and sitting Indian style, related sayings that I've had to unlearn. Having a powwow, circling the wagon, and low, high on the totem pole. This one is terrible, but I heard it so often as a kid. Taking a Puerto Rican shower. If you don't know what this means, basically it's putting on perfume or deodorant instead of showering. Yeah, it seems pretty blatantly offensive, but I never stopped to think about what it actually meant until I was in my teens. Probably because it was so casually thrown around in my family. For example, we're going to be late, just run upstairs and take a Puerto Rican shower. Or sometimes it was just used to refer to putting on too much perfume, cologne. I still catch myself thinking it once in a while. Unfortunately, it was really ingrained into my head as a normal saying when I was a child. Oh boy, do I have a story for this. As a kid, I didn't know Afro was anything to do with Africa. I didn't know how it related to black people. I literally just thought it was a hairstyle, something to do with disco. It wasn't a race thing. Anyone could have a full-on Afro, white or black, thanks Disco Stu from The Simpsons. Furthermore, I loved monkeys, the way some kids get really obsessed with stuff, like trains or dinosaurs or whatever. I thought monkeys were so cool. Knowing nothing about racism, I didn't know how racists sometimes connect monkeys with certain ethnic groups. So, entirely innocently, my name for the few online games that I played at that age, think RuneScape, was Afro-Chimp. There was no racism intended, I wasn't even aware of it. To me it was no different than a name like Ponytail Penguin, or Foxhawk Tiger. But looking back, the comments I used to get from other players make a whole lot more sense now. Doctor, my ignorance about racism led to me having what appeared to be a very racist online name. I recently learned that Dust Devil is offensive, those smaller tornadoes that happen and kick up dust. I've called them that my whole life and I'm in my 40s. Dust Devil is offensive. BC. Some Native American tribes believed that those small tornadoes were signs of their ancestors, and when Christians came in, they immediately wanted to call them something negative instead, hence Dust Devils. My grandma uses the phrase cotton picking as an adjective for something that's frustrating. The same way I might use fucking, for example. She might say I can't open this cat and picking pill bottle. I got so used to her saying it, and then one day when I was like 18 she said it and I put two and two together. I mentioned it to her, but I don't think she knew the origin either. Or if she had at one point she didn't anymore, because she was just really confused when I brought it up. I think maybe she picked it up from her mom without thinking about it, because I know her mother was racist. Unfortunately, like many white American people of her era. Two traditions from my country, the Netherlands. Sinterklaas, our Santa, has these helpers that are called Zwaartbuiten. The story behind them is that their face turned black after entering the chimneys to deliver presents. The story doesn't include why their hair, lips and accessories are traditionally black features. There's been a lot of backlash about it since it's obviously blackface, but many Dutch people still refuse to admit it racist and think nothing is wrong with it. Quick warning for if you're going to Google them. They're pretty terrifying if you didn't grow up with them, lol. Other one is singing happy birthday in different languages on elementary school. For languages like French or Spanish we use the real translation, but then there was the Chinese part, which is just some dumb made-up lyrics mocking the language completed by imitating Asian eyes. As a 4-year-old you don't see anything wrong with it, but looking back, yikes. I am a black guy who has always been extremely attracted to white women, especially those with light eyes, smooth wavy long light hair, blonde, red, light brown, narrow pointed noses, slender lips, etc. Basically women who are visually the opposite of me. I felt very entitled to date them and always considered it extremely racist if they would not date me. Whenever I asked a white woman out or flirted and she wasn't interested, I would become very confrontational and play the racism accusation card. Some white women are extremely coy and will make all sorts of excuses for why my race has nothing to do with why they wouldn't date me. This is typical behavior of women in Democrat cities. Other women, typically those in red areas, would be far less coy and just tell me straight up that they don't find African features appealing, or that they want to have white children who will resemble them in order to preserve their race. I would get extremely angry and accuse them of racism to their friends, and I would contact their universities or their employers to accuse them of racism to get them fired or expelled. However, as I got older I realized that it was actually me who was being racist. People have a right to only date their own race as well as to preserve it. I mean, think about it. If you tell people that they are not allowed to, or that they are criminals, racist for dating in their own race to preserve it, you are essentially telling them that the race has no right to exist, which is extremely racist. Obviously, if everyone mixes out, white women will not exist anymore. White features are recessive and mixed children resemble the race of the non-white parent. Look at Heidi Klum's children with Seal, for example. They look Nigerian and Somali, not ethnic European German. So I have backed down from my confrontational stance. I have accepted now that there are white women who are willing to mix out and those who don't. I should focus my energy on those who are willing to mix out and leave the white women who don't alone. Let them be. It is not for me to judge people as evil for being ethnocentric in their reproductive choices. Besides that, I also realized that my infatuation with white women was a form of subconscious, internalized white supremacy on my part. I genuinely believed that white women were top of the food chain and that I would only be a successful black man if I managed to date and impregnate a white woman. I considered the woman of my own race as not good enough. I could blame this on media, movies and TV shows and how they expose me so much more to European beauty than African beauty. But it's not an excuse to sideline the women of my own race. I now date whoever crosses my path and is willing, regardless of their race, and have dated numerous black women since my epiphany. The Old Mill Pond. From Happy Harmonies, the idea that the frogs were supposed to be black caricature had never even crossed my mind. Rewatching it, it's practically a minstrel show, although I still have a soft spot for the Mr. Sippy jingle. There was a comedy series of, I guess you'd say, audio plays, by a guy called Billy Birmingham in Australia called The 12 Man. They were parodies of the long-time cricket commentary team. Remembering that cricket was massively popular here and most people would have the cricket on a lot during the summer, and were quite funny in a sweary absurd way. All the voices were performed by Birmingham and he had quite good exaggerated parodies of the different commentators. A running theme was to parody the old white commentators and their struggles with pronouncing Indian, Pakistani and Sri Lankan and other ethnic names, but also had a running joke across the different installments of parody foreign names that the commentators had to try and pronounce. Isafid Gaivashat, Amidim Inagabar, etc. etc. Combine that with fairly liberal use of racial slurs and racist ideas about how the foreign cricketers would behave. This was amongst a bunch of other elements such as the commentators actually hating each other, feuding amongst themselves, and a fair bit of homophobic humor. As a kid, loved those tapes, thought they were hilarious, only later realized that a fair bit of the humor was only funny because it was punching down by mocking those who were different or in the minority. My mom used to collect gollywog pin badges. As a naive child I loved them and used to ask her if I could wear them. I actually went out in public with fucking gollywogs pinned to me. I might as well have carried a sign saying I'm a horrible little racist brat. Oh god, the shame, I'm cringing so much thinking about it now. The N-word. I didn't even know it was a word that can only be said by black people until I was 16 when the PewDiePie controversy happened. I was using it like any typical English terms like dude or mate or bro. Of course English isn't my native language and I wasn't from any neighboring countries to English ones, so it took 10 years to realize that. In the playground as a lad in the 80s, me and every other kid in the school would sing a racist song to choose who was it, etc. The song starts eeny, meeny, mini mo, catch N-word by the toe ... This ain't just my school either. My wife grew up 12 miles from me and everybody in her school sung it too. We never sang it to be racist, it's just now I know better. The schoolyard game Who's Afraid of the Black Man, it was popular in Finland. One of the kids gets selected as the black man, all the other kids try to run from one side of the yard to the other, and the black man tries to catch them. When someone gets caught, they become the new black man. The thing is, I always thought of the black man as some kind of ominous shadow or a silhouette. It only occurred to me years later that it was probably meant as a dark-skinned human. The game was later renamed as Who's Afraid of the Octopus, which has a bit similar pronunciation in Finnish, and it's still popular as far as I know. Yeah, I remember saying eeny meeny miny mo, catch N-word by the toe, if he hollers let him go. Eeny meeny miny mo. I also had no idea how bad it was. It was the late 70s/early to mid 80s and I was 10 years old, and I disgust myself thinking of the times I said that and thought it was okay. I grew up in an extremely multicultural primary school in an extremely multicultural city, so I had plenty of mixed race friends growing up, and they all referred to themselves as half-caste. I'm not sure if they realized what they were saying, but it was used very casually as a way of describing themselves that I picked up hanging out with them. Well then one day it came round to describing someone who was mixed race in class. It did not go down well. My mom always called the bruise you get from a quick painful nip, like if you trap your finger in a drawer or something, a black man's pinch. Literally never even considered it racist until my husband pointed it out many years ago. I just thought it was an actual medical term. the Bugs Bunny cartoon called Aldous and Rabbit Stew. Me and my sister thought it was pretty funny when we watched it on VHS. Especially the sucker part with the sound effect. I found out years later on Reddit that it's now part of a collection of episodes called the Censored 11 that are not shown anymore, and it actually came out in 1941. We watched it in the 90s. There were always bad stereotypes of English people in American cartoons back then. I remember being annoyed at them as it was always so far from the truth. This Simpsons one made me laugh though. Do shut up. It's much more on point than all the lords and ladies stereotypes.